started. So if you can thank your person you're conversing with. Make sure you get back with them afterwards, but I want to make sure that we cover enough information about the Colorado Water Plan so you feel engaged and informed and activated to make a difference for your rivers. So while we're transitioning, I would like to ask you for a moment, what is your favorite moment on a river? And what river would that be? Show of hands, I'd love to hear 3. Most amazing moment on a river. Right, go for it.
Looking down at lava falls.
Yes.
Before running.
On the Colorado. Absolutely. What's another? Please.
Floating down the Umpqua River in Oregon on air tubes. It's a really nice day and watching all the birds.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Absolutely. One more. Favorite river moment, please.
Jumping into Skull Rapid on the way to Moab.
Fantastic. 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 Well, I feel very fortunate to be in the position I am with National Audubon to be an advocate for river conservation as well as engaging the public in education and outreach so that you feel empowered to protect the rivers that you enjoy the most. Right now, before walking into the Water Forum today, how many of you knew that there was a water plan evolving? Okay, so I'd say about half. Okay, about half, and that's pretty good. I randomly love to take polls and ask people that I mingle with, even my hairstylist, and say, hey, do you know we're doing a Colorado Water Plan? And the answer is, no, I had no idea. Okay? This is supposed to be a public process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to become involved with it so that you can protect the memories that you have of rivers now and into the future for yourself and for multi-generations. Next, please. Great. So rivers connect us all, no matter what form of life, human, raccoon, crayfish, trout, doesn't matter. Absolutely, without water, there is no life. There are a vast number of organisms across the planet that can metabolize a multitude of different chemicals even, but without water, there is no life, period. So it's a very critical component. This is the Crystal River out on the west slope, and I want you to really take a good impression of this particular picture of the river because it's going to change very much later in the presentation. Rivers in the west connect us all. They are the lifeblood of our land, our economy, and our way of life. Our rivers are in jeopardy. Some of the biggest outliers are certainly the drought, invasive species, over-allocation or overuse, and unsustainable water management for our rivers. Next, please. So where does your water come from? We've talked about, we're a little bit more, preaching to the choir and involved right now, but where does your water come from? Oh, come on now. Right, okay. Where else does your water come from? Denver water, thank you. Okay. Where else does your water come from? Oh, here's some glacier. Okay, great.
Arapaho Glacier in CBT.
All right, there we go. Next, please. This is what I get oftentimes. I've been a teacher at Front Range for several years, and I teach biology and environmental science, a lot of ecology mixed in with that. So these are some of the answers that my students routinely give me. The faucet. Not necessarily wrong, but we were going further back. Underground plumbing, Denver water makes it. Okay, local reservoirs, Front Range rivers, West Slope rivers. Some of a very few percentage of my students have ever said, oh, they come from the West Slope. Okay, so next, please. 77% of Americans do not know where their water comes from. I think this is the root of the cause for our water management crises, that we do not have a connection to the respect, maybe, that water deserves. Because it's been infinite, it has been cheap, and it has been safe so far. We have not hit against resource limitation yet. And as an ecologist, this is what starts to sway or move our decisions about behavior patterns that we have, is the abundance of a resource. And so water, if we don't know where our water comes from, for me, I've lived on a well for almost 20 years. And so I know really, really critically where my water comes from. Okay? Most of our water that we use here in the Front Range and really across the state, it varies from place to place, but in general, our water that we use for drinking, that we use for bathing, that we use for cooking is river water. So we have a connection to rivers no matter what your particular recreational habits might be. If you like to tube, you like to kayak, you like to raft, great. If you are an angler, if you're a wildlife watcher, that's typically our recreational connection to our rivers, but we critically have a connection to our rivers because they support the life that we live. Okay, next please. Great. So let's talk a little bit about the story of where the water that comes from that many of us have been drinking already today starts from, for us, this is just a picture of the Continental Divide. Okay? So depending on which side of the slope you're on here, depends certainly where your water is going to be heading. Is it going to be east or is it going to be west? Okay, next please. This is actually a picture of the headwaters of the Colorado River in Rocky Mountain National Park. Okay, so we start from snow. We're starting to melt out just a little bit here and moving down gradient. Okay, next please. This is a picture of a very full Colorado River that I took last Saturday near Kremling. It is wonderful to see such abundant water in the river this year. It's a little atypical, okay, but a welcome sight. Next, please. Okay. As that water comes down, okay, if it goes to the east part of the eastern side of the divide, it's coming towards the Front Range. Western, it's going over to the west slopes and potentially rerouting its way coming over back to the east slope. Our water could be used in a variety of ways along that path. Agricultural needs, environmental and recreational needs, municipal, business and industry, all supported by our rivers. Okay. So our water has a multitude of demands on it, but a very limited supply. Next, please. So let's talk a little bit about some distribution across Colorado. All right. This is typically a range. Most of our water in the state is used for agricultural purposes. I've seen ranges literally from 85 to 95%. So 91 is a good medium. Only about 7.5% of our water is actually used for municipal and industrial. Most folks are a little surprised by that. So agriculture holds the lion's share of the water that we utilize in the state. So we have a unique distribution not only of population in our state, but of precipitation in our state. On the west slope, 80% of the precipitation in the state falls on the west slope. Now let me say another 80% statistic. 80% of our population, 80 to 85% of our population resides on the Front Range. The Front Range only receives 20% of our state's precipitation. So we have architected a numerous maze of trans-mountain diversions to pipe water from the west slope to the east slope where the people reside. Okay? This graphic down below here shows you a little bit as far as where the concentration of people are across the state. Okay? So where would you say most of that red is found? Denver, Boulder area, Front Range, Fort Collins, clear down towards the Springs and Pueblo. Okay, that's where the majority of our population is found. Next, please. Great. So, which river basin do we reside in? South Platte. There we go. Also, the South Platte is within the Front Range itself. Over 85% of the people in the Front Range live in the South Platte Basin. All right, so that's a lot of people on a limited water supply. Okay, so seeing this very slow-moving train coming at us for several years of how our growth and development and our population expansion is starting to outpace our water supplies Governor Hickenlooper in May of 2013 gave an executive order to create for this Colorado Water Conservation Board. We talk in acronyms all the time. If I don't rattle off CWCB, I don't know what I'm talking about. So the Colorado Water Conservation Board to basically usher our state's very first water plan ever. Of all the western states, Colorado and Arizona are the only states that do not have a water plan. Exactly. So it's about time we got on that train, all right? So we have a lot of responsibility within Colorado because we are a headwater state. We have several rivers that have their origins here within our boundaries. And because we are a headwater state and that water flows downhill, oftentimes outside of our state, that we have 9 interstate water compacts, which is some of the higher architecture for how we manage our water and where it is mandated to be distributed. The Colorado Water Conservation Board was created in 1937, so these folks have been around for a little while. This structure has been a part of our state for many years. The Colorado Water Conservation Board was created for the purpose of aiding in the protection and development of the waters of the state for the benefit of the present and future inhabitants of the state. That is verbatim. I wanted to bring out all of those words. Everybody has a different need to pull out of that particular statement. So the Colorado Water Conservation Board is here for the management, the protection, and the beneficial use of our waters within the state. House Bill 1177 set up some other structures that also work cooperatively with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. One is the IBCC, or the Interbasin Compact Committee. So how water is shared between basins. This bill also set up the structure for the Basin Roundtables, which are the main production sources for the Colorado Water Plan right now. Next, please. So with your handout here, it's a little bit easier if you take a look at it. Okay. The Colorado Water Plan timeline, this was issued in May 2013. We are fast moving along a track. How many folks have put any kind of input into the Colorado Water Plan process? Yeah, several. Great, great. Thank you for those of you who have. Let me give you a little orientation kind of quickly here. Within the Colorado Water Plan, by the end of next month, by the end of July, each of the 9 basins which have the roundtable structure, which are typically folks that meet anytime between 1 to 2 to sometimes 3 times a month to dictate how that particular basin is going to utilize and manage its water into the future. These folks will be submitting their very first draft of how they plan to use their water now and into the future at the end of July. Okay, how many folks are a little startled by that? Okay, yeah, okay, it's coming quick. It's coming very quickly. So you'll see in your timeline that actually several draft sections of the Colorado Water Plan have already been created. They are available online for your review. And I'm going to make sure that you have that website later before I conclude. So some of these overarching sections are statewide. The basins themselves are coming out with their draft plans. If you have something to do on Tuesday, then that's fine. But if you're looking for something to do, Tuesday, June 10th, is the South Platte Basin Roundtable meeting for June. The consultants will be reading the consumptive and non-consumptive plans. They will be voting, not necessarily voting to approve or disapprove at that point, taking input in from the public and also the other roundtable members. And from that point on, there will be revisions for the rest of June. With the new public input, and then in July, there will be a vote on whether to accept that particular draft of the South Platte Basin Roundtable Basin Implementation Plan, or the plan that's designed to architect how water will be used here in the South Platte from now and on into the future. Okay? So this is all coming very quickly, and if you say, oh, I haven't had any time to put any input in, that's okay, because once these drafts come out, it's a great time to get your reading glasses on and take a lot of time and read through how our South Platte Basin will be managing the water from now and into the future. With public comment, you can put comment in clear until March of 2015. Okay, so there's a little bit of time just yet. We're trying to front load the process because it's easier to speak up for environmental and recreational needs now in the beginning. Okay, ultimately, through this review process and public input process, ultimately at the end of 2015, the Colorado Water Plan proper will be bound. It will be our plan from now on into the future, December 2015. We may or may not have a different governor at that point. Okay? Well, next, please.
Be careful what you wish for.
Well, I know, that's for sure. Absolutely. So let's take a look a little bit about how we've satisfied our water needs to date. This is a chart showing all of the different trans-mountain diversions across the state. So we have been diverting water, vast amounts of water for a long time to support our lifestyle at present. Next, please. Okay. When I was talking a little bit earlier about the different new trans-mountain diversions, not necessarily brand new, but maybe using the same infrastructure like Moffett is doing or planning on doing, these are the projects that are in the pipe, so to speak. Water puns, I'm horrible for it. I apologize ahead of time. So this is a graph. This actually is an older version, but you'll see our water usage. This is from 2000, 2010, 2020. Look, we're already into this need for the IPPs. Okay, all of those different projects are being looked at. And if 100% of all of those projects are successful and come to be, all of the IPPs collectively will produce 102,000 acre-feet of new water supply annually. These are already projects that many people across the state, water developers particularly, are counting on happening. Because even at present, depending on the year of precipitation, we could be right at our balance point of supply and demand right now. Okay? Most people put it off to 2020, and we're looking at the 600,000 acre-foot per year deficit by 2050. Now, an acre-foot's kind of a fuzzy term. It's the amount of water needed to flood 1 acre of land 1 foot deep. So if that gives you an idea. Okay, next please. Okay. So let's take a little look about where we've been borrowing this water from. As my good friend Joe Evans was talking about this morning as far as the trans-mountain diversions, we have been borrowing and using this water from the Colorado River. Ultimately, we are separated into two larger regional areas, the upper Colorado Basin, the lower Colorado Basin. So in December of 2012, the Bureau of Reclamation, which is the government agency given charge to manage basically water and a lot of the dam projects across the country, came out with a water supply and demand availability study with the Colorado River. In December of 2012, the Bureau of Rec came out and said the Colorado River is an overallocated and highly variable system. Furthermore, within that same report, the Bureau of Reclamation warned that water demand is exceeding water supply. Next, please. Okay. So a graph just kind of visually, some of us are much more visual learners. This is our water use from about, 1920-ish on up and in projected usage in the future. The blue line is the water supply availability from the Colorado River. Yes, please. This is a 10-year running average. So these are average numbers all the way up through. And this is not per person, but this is regional. Correct. And you will see that we've intersected a couple places where we have used more water than is actually available. And the projected amount, we just really don't know because climate change starts to factor in as well. Okay? Next, please. Okay. So let's take a look at what all the great things that the Colorado River has done for us historically. So the Colorado River provides water, critical water for Arizona, California, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, and Wyoming. It provides drinking water for nearly 40 million people altogether. We irrigate about 5.5 million acres of land. The Colorado River also supports 22 federally recognized tribes, 7 national wildlife refuges, 11 national parks, hydropower facilities where we're offsetting the use with fossil fuels. And all in all, the Colorado supports an incredible, vast recreation economy. Within our state alone per year, it's anywhere between 9.5 to 11 billion with a B dollars per year in recreational income within our state. Yeah, that's a lot. Okay, so money talks. You know, everything that we do to recreate on rivers, that all contributes. What we love to do, this contributes to that income coming into the state. And 87% of voters in Basin states say that low water levels in the river is one of the most serious problems. Okay, and we're going to give a try to see if we can take a look. Great. I'm hoping the sound comes because the scenery with it's pretty amazing. Still thinking. Yes. I'm glad we only went with the shorter video today instead of the longer. How many of you have spent time on the Colorado, upper or lower? Doesn't matter. Great, great, great. It's an incredible river system.
Was that 11 billion Colorado River total, or was that Colorado River in Colorado?
With our census data, within 2011, it was $11 billion within Colorado stated. Yeah. Yeah. It's a huge amount of money. Oh, I'm hoping. We'll give it another moment. In 2013, you might see the header. In 2013, American Rivers, in their Most Endangered Rivers initiative, named the entire Colorado the #1 most endangered river in our country. This year, it's just the upper Colorado because of the threat of water diversions. Yes?
How are we compared to other countries and states in our use of diversity?
Oh, can I come back to that? I want to take this as soon as it's available. Great, thank you.
I have run these canyons for 6 million years. I have traveled from the
So, almost makes you get a little choked up, to watch the power of this river be harnessed and used and oftentimes misused in ways to support lifestyles in cities and whatnot that really are pretty illustrious with the water usage across the West. Okay, thank you. Next, please. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what binds the Colorado River as far as Colorado itself is concerned. Okay, so the Colorado River Compact was signed in 1922 by President Herbert Hoover, and the Colorado River Compact requires upper basin states to produce 7.5 million acre-feet of water each year. So for those of you who didn't realize, Lake Powell is like our bank account. We have to discharge so many million acre-feet per year that will be used by the lower basin states. This is just one compact. This compact has been amended dozens of times. So this is the original, and then on top of that, more and more specificity has come in over time. Okay, next please. Okay. We talked a little bit before about climate change projections, and the Colorado Water Conservation Board, again, pretty out in front as far as their studies of what they have noted with climate change and our projected models. And this, again, from the CWCB's website itself, that current climate models project that we are going to warm by 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit by 2025, and then by 4 degrees Fahrenheit by 2050. With that, summers are likely to be more warm, okay, then our winter temperatures changing. So summer is going to fluctuate a little bit more. Warmer temperatures will affect evaporation rates in our rivers, in our streams, reservoirs, and it could make less water available. We're looking at a projected shift as far as our melt in the spring flush happens. With warmer temperatures, that flush of water, the spring flush, is going to come earlier. That could be mistimed for macroinvertebrates, mistimed for fish spawning, mistimed for riparian habitat usage. This is going to be a very potential critical threat with the riparian ecosystem itself. Estimates are that lower elevation snowpack below 8,200 feet is likely to decline, with modest declines projected for high elevation snowpack, which is above 8,200 feet. We are fed by glacial melt, snow melt, and precipitation for our river water. With a change in this, we are altering how much water we have available. Okay? And again, the timing of the runoff is projected to shift a little earlier. So, all of the compacts, the way we utilize our water, climate change, and for how much the Colorado River currently does support, this creates quite a problem. Next, please. Okay? So remember, I talked about the straws, okay, as they're known. Okay? The straws that draw west slope water over here onto the Front Range, and there's a lot of them. Next, please. The one thing I haven't talked about yet, we were talking about all this that the river supports and very little bit about what healthy rivers themselves actually need. Okay, so we're going to dive into that just for a moment. So this is the picture of the Eagle River, and I love this quote by my good friend Ken Neubecker. A healthy river is more than water flowing in a channel. Any gutter can do that. Okay? Here we go. Next, please. Okay? Rivers need water. Remember the picture in the beginning? This is the crystal. Yeah. Okay? Reduced and altered flows can cause damage that can eventually result in total ecosystem collapse. And remembering back to what Allison spoke about this morning, about how biodiversity can be 10 times higher in riparian and riverine ecosystems, okay? Because water supports life. Next, please. Okay? What we need for healthy river maintenance is a natural hydrograph. And are we familiar with the term hydrograph? It's how we chart discharge. It could be by the day, it could be by the month, it could be by the year, 10 years, etc. So it's a time and volume graph. So here we're talking about a seasonal hydrograph, and this is the Roaring Fork near Glenwood Springs. And you'll see that, November, January, March, not very much, and the next thing you know, here comes May and June. Huge flush of water. When I was in Glenwood Springs earlier, just this past week, the Colorado River on Tuesday was running at 22,600 CFS. On Wednesday morning, it was running 22,800 CFS. She was still coming up, okay? It was incredible to see that power. Closed the bike trail, but nonetheless, it was amazing to watch that power. Okay, so we are having quite a good environmental flush year right now. Okay, next please. If we zoom in a little bit and we look at what a healthy river's hydrograph looks like on a daily schedule, it looks like a heartbeat. Just that little up and down and up and down and up and down. Okay, so this is going from May 20th, sure it's about a week, May 27th. And so we have this cycle because of the daytime high temperatures and the nighttime possible refreezing, okay, during this time. So this is what, again, a healthy river looks like. All right, next please. This is what a river looks like, a river hydrograph looks like with a diversion structure on it. And it's flat-lined. Okay? It's somebody turning a wheel most of the time. Okay? Turning it on, turning it off. And actually, when I was a participant on a urban water river tour coming up, going along the South Platte, there's possibility, especially when you come into the Front Range and move out to the plains, of called what's sweeping the river, where the entire river is diverted. Not anything goes further downriver. That's how some ditch operators work, when that bulk of water is needed in a certain direction. Okay, so we've probably seen these. Most of our rivers have some sort of diversion structure on them. Okay, and the vast majority of our rivers have several of these diversion structures on them. This is what we just eliminate the variability, and rivers are dynamic systems, dynamic ecosystems that need that disturbance. Next, please. Okay, so a healthy river ecosystem, we need that natural variation. We need a natural hydrograph. And when I talk with the Colorado Water Conservation Board about this, and I have several meetings with them, even weekly, talking about environmental flows or flushing flows, that is a very controversial thing to be talking about. Yeah. Within that, it is just wrong. As a stream ecologist and a kayaker, rivers need to have variation. They need to have the dynamic quality. Flushing flows are wasted water. Okay, we'll talk about the trade-offs with that here in a moment. High flushing flows flush sediment out of the riverbeds. They can mobilize the cobble in the riverbeds, all critical. Recharge alluvial aquifers, which is necessary for our stabilization of water availability. They can move the channel. We had a lot of channel moving last fall. Okay, and there was a lot of heartache because people are trying to put the rivers back in their original channels. Rivers like to move, okay, and water does not like to be constrained for too long. Okay, diverting more than 20% of a river's native flow greatly increases degradation risk. And do you remember what the percentage is on the Fraser that's being diverted right now? 60, absolutely. And if you also would like to follow along, there's even more in-depth information on their Healthy Rivers fact sheet. Okay. Additional 15 to 20% looking to be diverted off of the Fraser, potentially 80% or more coming out of that river itself. Okay. Healthy riparian zones, which are all the vegetation, where all the birds live and all the wildlife critters tend to live in this vegetation that surrounds the rivers. That's critical to be flooded. With that natural hydrograph, you get that natural flooding, you get the movement of nutrients, you get the germination of seeds, and the regeneration of growth, which is so critical for a multi-structural habitat. Okay? And again, the channel is only the surface of the whole river ecosystem. We have to remember that it expands out into the riparian zone as well. Next, please. Okay? So some of the functions that wetlands and rivers provide for us totally for free, okay? Totally for free. Storing of floodwaters. Well, what happened in fall? We'll come back to that. Storing of floodwaters, recharging aquifers, sediment control, okay? Water purification, habitat provision, forage for wildlife. They function as an ecotone, which is where two ecosystems, upland and wetland, come together. And anytime you have two ecosystems come together, you have a flurry of species that utilize those habitats because they use the best aspects of both. And of course, that incredible amount of biodiversity. Next, please. Okay. So we do have an in-stream flow program that the Colorado Water Conservation Board does provide for. Now, do you remember what the year was that Joe Evans had said the in-stream flow program began? Oof, that's a tough one. 73, exactly. 73. And do you remember what I had said about the date that the Burlington Ditch folks said, if you don't have a water right older than, you don't get any water? 1885. So any in-stream flow rights are often very junior to established water rights senior holders. That means that everybody gets their water, and if there's anything left, the river gets it. This is the Crystal River a little bit closer in. This is the Crystal River at the Thompson Road Bridge. This is in September of 2012. This is at 1 CFS. The in-stream flow rate is 100 CFS. There wasn't enough water for the river that year. And to give you an idea, a CFS, cubic foot per second, is roughly estimated to how many basketballs might be passing you at one time. Okay, a basketball is about a cubic foot. Okay, next please. This is a map of where all of the in-stream flow programs, all the different river reaches that actually hold an in-stream flow right. There's not, looks like a lot, but with how many rivers that we have across the state, that's not much. Okay? So the in-stream flow program is at least something. It's at least something, and I thank the CWCB for that. But it's oftentimes not enough. It's oftentimes not enough to provide enough water for a fish to swim vertically. It is oftentimes not enough to saturate the riparian areas, to promote healthy riverbeds and stream channels. Next, please. Okay. So this is what happens when water becomes plumbing, when rivers become plumbing. Okay. We utilize our rivers often in a way that is just a delivery system from water from point A to point B to somebody who holds a beneficial use for a water right. So when you see water flowing in a channel, in a river, it's actually on its way to go do something. Or it's mandated to be exported out of the state, potentially, depending on a different compact. Okay? So when we alter the flows, we could flatline, remember that flatline hydrograph that I showed you? We could flatline a river with diversions, reducing the variability, which is so critical for river sustainability. You also, by slowing the water or lowering the water, when you slow it down, you allow more of the solar radiation to heat it up. Warm water does not hold as much dissolved oxygen as cold water. Okay? Slower water also allows sediment buildup. We have gravel bed rivers and streams in our state. Take a look the next go around and see how much is covered in sediment because of the slow flow. Okay? And oftentimes the streams and rivers over time become channelized. And again, we have taken water from one basin, never to return to it and come into a different basin. Okay? Next, please. Okay? So, this is some information that I came across just recently. This is from the Colorado Parks and Wildlife folks, okay, CPW, and it's the wetlands mapping inventory of where we have I particularly pulled up this ArcGIS layer that shows wetland stressors. So any place that you see red, the wetlands and the riverine systems are subjected to stress. It's kind of a lot. Okay. Kind of. Try to be a little bit of a positive. So within our basin itself, the South Platte, there's a tremendous concentration of stressors for our wetlands. Some of that is runoff. Some of that is just impaired water. Pollution, stormwater runoff. There's a number of factors, and I want to get too far into it because there's a tremendous list that actually impacts our wetlands and our river health. But I want to bring home the fact that the functions provided by each individual aquatic habitat or river reach, even along the way, they contribute to integrated function of a water scale level. Every wetland or river reach contributes either bettering or making a worse situation for the water downstream. When our wetlands are impaired, our water quality is impaired, our ability to store, flood water is impaired because ecosystem itself is not healthy. It's not resilient to pick up all of that. Next, please. So I wanted to show you this particular graph. I think this one is one of the most meaningful to me. This is from the Colorado watershed approach, watershed level management. The High Plains area next to the Front Range has been mapped for how we have altered what our wetlands were and what they are now. Who can tell me the difference? What should we have a lot of, but what do we have a lot of? Yeah. Let me bring your attention. The last two are more consolidated for you wetland buffs in the house. That's what this side is for. So we should have riverine ecosystems. What we do have, lakes. What we should have for lakes. Where are all these lakes found? What are they used for? Reservoirs, storage for the Front Range usage. So this is how we have altered our entire ecosystem regionally across the whole range. Diverting water from the west, permanently removing water from west slope, bringing that water to the east slope, creating all these lakes that we really would not have naturally for storage. We're evaporating it all like crazy. The rivers that we do have here in the front are typically conduits to move west slope water somewhere, which results in increased channeling and impaired function. More lakes, less rivers, the exact opposite of what we had historically. Next, please. So let's get back around to the Colorado Water Plan. What can you do about all of this? Okay, what can you do? So when I mentioned earlier, we are very, very good at quantifying how much water we need for faucets, how much water we need for agriculture, how much water we need for industry. And again, that's 600,000 acre-feet per year shortage. And there is some quantification, okay, or data that we are operating on or trying to operate on as far as identifying environmental focal areas, identifying areas with high recreational value, high biodiversity, things like that. That data, however, is a little bit dated. It's from what we love to call SWASI. It's the Statewide Water Supply Initiative of 2010. That is where every basin across the whole state identified all the areas where they thought were in some kind of environmental accolade, and they were going to put it down. And that is what is forming some of the basis of the Colorado Water Plan. The data that was put down is not perfect by any means. Okay. We have quantified our consumptive gap. We know it down to the acre-foot per year, 600,000. We do not know what our environmental or our non-consumptive gap is. Non-consumptive means that the water is not used up. It's used for environmental enhancement of the riparian vegetation, maintenance for river channels, etc., and recreation. These are all ways that the water is not used up, so we call it non-consumptive. So when is the Colorado Water Plan finished? Do you remember when I said? Like given to whichever governor, we're not going to get into that, given 2015. We are not going to fully map environmental and recreational needs until 2016. What's the problem? We will not be looking at environmental flow science or environmental or recreation needs in depth until SWASI 2016. Okay? So, within Audubon, within our Western Rivers Action Network, we are trying to activate and educate as many people as possible to be the voices that the Colorado Water Plan so desperately wants public involvement for. It is so easy to become involved. It will literally take you 2 or 3 minutes max. And it can literally just be submitting your input and saying, hey, this river means the most to me, and why? It doesn't have to be high-end scientific environmental jargon. It can just be that. They want this water plan to come up grassroots within each basin, each of the 9 basins. And they separated Metro out, by the way. We have 8 major river basins across the state, but Metro is so unique, we had to pull that one out. So it's its own round table setup, still couched within the South Platte. So The basins want public input. They have cried for it the entire time. No, I don't think they've gone about recruiting the public correctly, and that's why we're engaging. It's the center of my life right now, as far as activating people to say, hey, you can be involved in this process. Next, please. Okay. Because the past water management that we have done up to date, I really believe we can do it incredibly better. I think with incentives and reusing water, capturing and reusing the water that we do have, would put us on a better path, obviously. But the water management that we have done thus far has led the Upper Colorado to be the #2 most endangered river basin in the whole country, and the threat is increased water diversions. Okay. You'll see the white on there as well. The White River is threatened by oil and gas development. All right, next please. All right, so what can you do? The biggest thing, and again, preaching to the choir, is to change our relationship with water. Use what we need, not wasting it, not squandering it. Rethinking our relationship with water, okay? Submitting input, it's just this easy too. Going to coloradowaterplan.com. If you want some power pack things to say, bring some of the facts off of the Colorado Water Plan sheet and our Healthy Rivers fact sheet, throw it at them, okay? It's just that easy. You can also become a part of our Western Rivers Action Network. You do not have to be a member of Audubon for it. I hate to say I am not a member of Audubon. I know. I told you I'm a river person. Birds, I love them, absolutely, but a little bit lower on my list. Not by much, though. You can become a member of the Western Rivers Action Network, where you would receive a monthly email update. I write the Colorado sections, the updates of what you need to know, what's happening at the Colorado Water Plan level, what's happening at the river conservation level, and you'll get that per month. And you might get an action alert if I need to say, hey, I need folks to click through and send a message to the Colorado Water Conservation Board about river health. We're getting ready to launch one. We are going to ask that the Colorado Water Plan, since we do not have the quantified environmental and recreational flows across the state figured out, we're going to ask that the Colorado Water Plan have a place marker, a commitment that says we will do this. Because the basins are taxed. The basins say we can't possibly get those numbers. We can't possibly have that money, that budget, in order to do so. So we're going to ask them for a placeholder. That's going to come up next week. We're going to ask that. Okay? So the biggest thing is to get involved. And if you like, take the next moment. I'd love to field a couple questions. I know we're running a little bit long, but I'd love to field a couple questions. If you have your postcard, on the back, this is going to be hand-delivered by a core group of our RAN, or Western Rivers Action Network members, to the governor. You can fill in the river that you care about the most. That's the top blank. You need to fill out the information below so it counts as a legit political action. That's what this postcard is. This is your vote for this river, and he will see this, or at least staff will see it and quantify it. If you'd like to become part of our Western Rivers Action Network, please fill out the very bottom, because I will enter your information into our database, and then you'll get our e-newsletters per month and our action alerts. So I'd love for you to take a moment to do that, and I'll need to collect them back so that we can add them to our enormous box that's starting of them, so that we can have a mass number of postcards and say, look, this is what your constituents think about rivers. Okay? So great. Any questions that I can field in the meanwhile while we're doing that? Yes. Okay, next, please. Impossible. It's already been done and been denied, right? Thank you, though. That's a good idea. And the basins do feel very overwhelmed and very overworked. They're trying to quantify things that have never been quantified before or even thought about before. And literally, most of them started in January to analyze an entire basin's worth of water use. Yeah, thank you for that. Other questions? Yes, please.
I saw on one of the charts a region on the eastern border called Republican River,
Yes.
which was not one of the 8 areas you
Correct,
talked about.
correct. The Republican flows into Kansas and Nebraska directly. So we have just a small portion of it, but the lion's share of it is in Kansas.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's why.
Yeah, correct. Thanks. Great observation. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? We've had a request for folks to go to the microphone.
Oh, no, we don't have time.
Oh, okay. Oh, perfect, perfect. No problem. So if you'd like to fill out those postcards, if you could pass them towards the inside lanes here, or pass them forward and towards the center, I'd love to collect them. Thank you so much for your time, and please get involved in this process. That is what the Colorado Water Conservation Board wants, is people's involvement, and I told them, I said, well, we'll get them to you then. Look out. So please, go out and be your greatest river conservation advocate. Okay.